What if your roommate's dad already knew your deepest secret before you even stepped through the front door? That question slammed into me like a freight train the moment Austin pulled our rental car onto the long gravel driveway leading to his family home in rural Pennsylvania. The house sat there under a bright blue sky, white clapboard siding gleaming, American flag fluttering gently from the porch rail, and a tire swing still hanging from the old oak tree in the front yard, just like he'd described in every late-night dorm conversation back at NYU. I was Evan Matthews, 22, journalism major, the guy who always played it safe, and Austin Reynolds was my roommate, my best friend, and for the last 8 months, the man I had fallen hopelessly in love with. We had kept everything locked down. No hand-holding on campus, no lingering glances in the cafeteria, just stolen kisses behind the locked door of our tiny apartment when the city lights flickered outside. But now we were here, 2 hours outside Philadelphia, and the weight of that secret pressed harder with every crunch of tires on gravel. Austin killed the engine and turned to me, his blue eyes steady but his smile a little too tight. "You good?" he asked, voice low like we were still back in the dorm hiding from our suite mates. I nodded, but my stomach was a knot. His family thought I was just the polite roommate tagging along for Thanksgiving break because my own parents were in Europe on business. That was the story we'd rehearsed. Simple. Safe. Except nothing about loving Austin felt simple anymore. He reached over and squeezed my knee once, quick and hidden, before stepping out. I followed, grabbing our duffel bags from the trunk, the late November air crisp with the smell of wood smoke and fallen leaves. The front door swung open before we reached the steps. Austin's mom, Karen, rushed out in a red sweater, arms wide, pulling her son into a hug that lifted him off his feet. "My baby's home," she cried, then turned to me with the same warmth. "Evan, we've heard so much about you. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready." Behind her stood Austin's younger sister, Mia, 16 and texting furiously, and then his father, Richard Reynolds, 6'2", with salt and pepper hair and the kind of steady gaze that made you feel like he could read every thought you'd ever had. Richard shook my hand firmly, his palm calloused from years running the family construction business. "Welcome, Evan," he said, voice even. But something in the way his eyes held mine a second longer sent ice down my spine. It wasn't suspicion exactly. It was recognition. Inside, the house smelled like roast turkey and cinnamon. Family photos lined the hallway, little Austin on a pony, high school Austin in football gear, and one of him and me at last year's NYU homecoming that Austin had sent home without thinking. My heart stuttered when I spotted it. Richard noticed me looking and gave a small nod, like we shared a private joke I hadn't been told yet. Dinner passed in a blur of laughter and stories, Mia grilling me about New York life, while Karen piled seconds onto my plate. Austin sat beside me at the long oak table, our knees brushing once under the cloth, and for a moment I let myself believe we could pull this off. Just friends, nothing more. But after the pie, when everyone drifted to the living room for football, Richard lingered in the kitchen. "Evan, mind helping me with the dishes?" he asked casually. Austin shot me a quick glance, but I followed. Alone at the sink, water running, Richard handed me a plate and said quietly, "You two seem close." I froze, suds dripping. "Yeah, best roommates ever," I managed. He didn't smile. "I've raised 3 kids, Evan. I know what close looks like." The plate nearly slipped from my hands. He kept washing, voice calm. "We'll talk later. Just wanted you to know I see you." My pulse roared in my ears. He already knew. Before I could say a single word, before I could decide how to tell the truth, Austin's father had already cracked open the door to the one secret that could shatter everything. That night, I barely slept. The guest room was cozy, quilted bedspread, shelves of old trophies, but every creak in the old house felt like an accusation. Austin had slipped in after midnight, crawling under the covers for 10 stolen minutes, his hand warm against my chest. "He doesn't know," he whispered, trying to convince us both. "Dad's just observant." But I remembered the look in Richard's eyes at the sink and knew Austin was wrong. By morning the house smelled like coffee and bacon, and Karen was already humming Christmas carols even though Thanksgiving was still 2 days away. Mia dragged Austin out to show him her new car, leaving me alone with Richard on the back porch overlooking the frost-covered fields. He handed me a mug without asking if I wanted one. Black, 2 sugars, right? Austin mentioned it. The casual detail hit like a punch. We sat in rocking chairs, steam rising between us. Richard stared at the horizon. I wasn't snooping, he began. Your Instagram stories from last summer. Same beach, same sunset, different accounts. Then Austin started smiling at his phone the way I smiled at his mother 30 years ago. He took a slow sip. I'm not mad, Evan. I'm worried. My throat closed. I had spent years building walls, convincing myself that loving a man made me less of a son, less of a man, less of everything society said I should be. Coming here was supposed to be a test run, not an ambush. Richard continued, voice steady but not unkind. Austin's always been the golden boy, football captain, straight A student, the kid who never gave me a minute of trouble. If this is who he is, fine. But this town isn't New York. People talk. His mother's church group, my crew at work, they won't understand. He looked at me then, eyes searching. And you? You ready for what happens when the world stops pretending? I wanted to argue, to say we were just figuring it out, but the truth sat heavy. I wasn't ready. I had panic attacks just thinking about telling my own parents. The idea of Austin's entire world knowing felt like standing naked in the town square. Austin found us later, worry etched on his face. He pulled me aside in the barn where old tractors slept under tarps. What did he say? I told him everything. His shoulders dropped. I never wanted you to face this alone. We stood there among the dust and hay, and for the first time since arriving I let him hold me properly, his arms tight around my waist. The moment felt both perfect and terrifying, because now the secret wasn't ours anymore. It belonged to a man who could either protect it or burn it down. That afternoon we drove into town for supplies, Austin's hand resting on my thigh once we passed the city limits. But every truck that passed us made me pull away. The fear was already changing how I touched him, how I breathed when he was near. And deeper down, a quieter terror whispered, what if loving him meant I had to become someone I wasn't sure I could survive as? Thanksgiving dinner should have been easy. Laughter, too much food, football on low in the background. Instead it felt like walking a tightrope. Karen kept refilling glasses, Mia scrolled TikTok under the table, and Richard watched us with that same quiet knowing. Halfway through the meal, Austin's older brother, Jake, arrived late from Pittsburgh, beard thicker than I remembered from the photos. Jake clapped Austin on the back, then turned to me with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. So you're the famous roommate. Heard you're practically family now. The word family landed wrong, like a warning wrapped in politeness. Later, when the women cleared plates, Jake cornered me by the woodpile. Look, I'm not here to judge, he said, breath fogging in the cold. But Dad called me last week. Said Austin's different since college. Said you might be the reason. My stomach dropped. Richard hadn't just known. He had already talked to his other son. Jake continued. Austin's got a future here. Maybe take over the business, marry some nice girl, give mom grandkids. You show up and suddenly he's talking about staying in New York forever? Just don't break my little brother, okay? I wanted to shout that I loved Austin more than Jake could understand, but the words stuck. Instead, I nodded like a coward and walked away, chest tight with the weight of every expectation I was ruining. That night, Austin and I argued in whispers in the guest room. You should have told me your dad called Jake, I hissed. Austin ran a hand through his hair. I didn't know until tonight. Evan, I'm scared too. If they push me to choose, he didn't finish. We lay there inches apart, not touching, the silence louder than any fight. The next morning, Mia found an old photo album and dragged us to the couch. Page after page showed Austin as a kid, soccer trophies, prom with girls, the life everyone assumed he would keep living. She looked at me curiously. You guys are really good friends, huh? The innocence in her voice cracked something inside me. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection, eyes red. Who was I turning Austin into? The golden boy who used to fit perfectly here, or the man who might have to leave it all behind? Richard found me on the porch again after lunch. This time he didn't dance around it. I've watched you two for 3 days. The way you look at each other when you think no one's watching. It's the same way I looked at Karen before I asked her to marry me. He paused. I'm not asking you to leave. I'm asking you to be sure. Because if you're sure, then we figure out how to tell the rest of them. Together. His words should have been a lifeline, but they felt like chains. Sure, I wasn't sure of anything except that loving Austin had already cost me sleep, peace, and now maybe his entire family. When Austin joined us, the three of us stood in silence under the gray sky. For the first time, I saw the fear in Austin's eyes mirror my own. The secret was out, but the real storm was just beginning. Sunday morning, the church bells rang across the valley, and Karen insisted we all go. I sat in the wooden pew between Austin and Mia, the hymnals heavy in my hands, every lyric about truth and light feeling aimed straight at me. Richard sat on the other side of Austin, his posture straight, but his hand rested once on his son's shoulder in a way that felt protective rather than controlling. After the service, the congregation spilled onto the lawn for coffee and cookies. An older woman, Karen's friend from Bible study, pulled Austin aside. "Heard you brought a friend from the city. Such a nice young man. You two planning to stay in New York forever?" The question was innocent on the surface, but I caught the glance she shot me. Small towns have their own radar. Back home, the tension boiled over in the kitchen. Jake had stayed an extra day and decided to help with chores. While stacking firewood, he muttered loud enough for me to hear, "Dad's gone soft. Used to be if a guy looked at my brother sideways, he'd handle it." Austin overheard and snapped. The brothers argued in the yard, voices rising until Richard stepped between them. "Enough," he said quietly, but the command carried. Jake stormed off to his truck. Austin stood there breathing hard, fists clenched. I wanted to reach for him, but Karen was watching from the window. Later, Austin found me in the guest room, eyes wet. "I've never fought with Jake like that. Not once." His voice broke. "Evan, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should just pretend for them." The words landed like a slap. Pretend. The same word I had used on myself for years. That afternoon, we escaped to the woods behind the house, hiking the trail Austin had run as a kid. Snow dusted the pines, and for a while we walked in silence, hands finally linked because no one could see. Austin stopped at a clearing where an old tree fort still clung to branches. "I used to hide up there when Dad was mad at me," he said. "Never thought I'd hide something this big." He turned to me, eyes searching. "Do you regret coming?" I shook my head, but the truth was more complicated. Part of me regretted exposing him to this pain. Another part knew that without this trip, we would have kept lying forever. We kissed there under the gray sky, slow and desperate, the kind of kiss that tasted like goodbye and forever at the same time. When we pulled apart, Austin whispered, "I choose you." No matter what. But the crack in his voice told me the choice was already tearing him apart. Monday brought the real breaking point. Richard called a family meeting after breakfast. No outsiders, just the five of them and me. He didn't yell. He simply said, "Austin and Evan are together. They love each other. And I've known for weeks." Karen's coffee cup clattered. Mia's eyes widened. Jake slammed his fist on the table. The room exploded in voices, shock, questions, tears. Karen asked if it was a phase. Jake demanded to know if Austin was sure. Mia just looked between us like we were strangers. I sat frozen, the outsider who had detonated their perfect picture. Austin reached for my hand under the table, gripping so tight his knuckles went white. In that moment, I understood the real cost. Not just my secret, but his entire childhood identity. And I didn't know if love was enough to rebuild what we were breaking. The next 48 hours blurred into a nightmare of slammed doors and whispered arguments. Karen avoided eye contact at meals. Jake left for Pittsburgh without saying goodbye. Mia locked herself in her room, blasting music. Richard remained steady, but I caught him staring at old family photos late at night, like he was mourning something. Austin and I barely spoke. Every conversation felt mined with landmines. On Tuesday, he drove me to the overlook where the whole valley spread out below, snow-covered and silent. "I told my mom I'm not confused," he said, voice raw. "I told her I've never been happier than when I'm with you." He paused. She cried. Not because she hates me, because she's scared for me. I wanted to comfort him, but guilt choked me. I had come here thinking I was brave, yet I had only brought pain. That night, I packed my bag in secret. The 3 a.m. bus back to New York left from the next town over. I wrote Austin a note. "I love you enough to leave so you don't have to choose." I was almost out the door when Richard's voice stopped me in the hallway. "Running won't fix it, son." He stood there in sweatpants, hair messy, looking more like a tired father than the all-knowing patriarch. I watched my own brother lose his family because he was too proud to stay and fight for the truth. Don't make Austin lose you the same way. His words hit harder than any shout. He handed me a thermos of coffee. Sleep on it. Tomorrow we talk, all of us. No more secrets. I stayed. But the decision felt like another surrender. Wednesday morning the family gathered again, this time with no yelling. Karen spoke first, eyes red but voice steady. I raised you to be honest, Austin. If Evan makes you honest, then I'll learn to understand. Mia surprised everyone by saying, "You two are cute together. Like in those movies." Jake texted a single message, "Give me time." Richard looked at me directly. "Evan, you're not the enemy. You're the reason my son smiles the way he used to before the world told him how to live." The words cracked the last wall inside me. I had spent years believing my love made me unworthy of any family. Here, in this house that smelled of pine and coffee, they were offering me a seat at the table anyway. Austin took my hand openly for the first time in front of them all. The gesture was small, but it felt like the first real breath I had taken in days. The drive back to New York was quiet, but different. Snow fell softly on the highway, and Austin's hand rested on mine the entire way. We didn't need to speak. The silence carried everything we had survived. When we reached the city lights, the apartment felt smaller yet safer. Over the next weeks, we slowly let the truth out. First to our closest friends, then in careful posts that didn't scream, but simply existed. Austin's mother started sending care packages with notes that said, "Thinking of both of you." Mia sent memes. Even Jake called once, awkward but trying. Richard's last text before Christmas read, "Proud of the man you're becoming, son." Both of you. I still woke up some nights with the old fear clawing at my chest. What if the world outside this apartment turned cruel again? But then Austin would pull me close, and the fear quieted. We had walked through fire together and emerged not unscathed, but stronger. The boy who once hid in dorm rooms had become the man who could hold his boyfriend's hand in public. The son who feared losing his family had discovered one that chose to grow instead of break. And I, Evan Matthews, finally understood that love wasn't about perfection or safety. It was about standing in the light, even when it burned. Months later, back in Pennsylvania for spring break, we sat on the same porch where Richard first confronted me. He handed us both beers and said simply, "You made it." Austin laughed, the sound free and full. I looked at the man beside me, the one who had risked everything, and realized the secret that once terrified us had become the truth that saved us. The valley stretched out, green and endless, and for the first time I wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. We had chosen each other, and the world, slowly but surely, was learning to make room. In Evan and Austin's journey, we witness how one hidden truth can either destroy or rebuild an entire life. The story teaches that fear of rejection often hurts more than the rejection itself, and that real love demands courage, not just in the beginning, but every single day after. Families can surprise us with grace when we give them the chance. The quiet lesson here is simple. Stop carrying secrets that weigh you down. Speak them gently, stand in them bravely, and let the people who matter choose to walk beside you. Because on the other side of fear waits a version of yourself, and your love, that finally feels free.